I was not prepared for that. When I joined the program, I thought it would be just another cog in NASA's technological theater, an obedient engineer on a chessboard carefully manipulated by politicians and scientists. But the truth was nothing like what I expected. My name is Jonathan Greaves, and until a short while ago, I was one of the technical coordinators of the Artemis Recon 5 mission, one of the most secretive unmanned missions ever launched by NASA. If you think Artemis was just a project to send astronauts back to the moon, I'm sorry to say that's only what they allowed you to see. The real mission had nothing to do with colonization or geological exploration. It was about what was hidden on the dark side of the moon. And what we found there, well, I'm going to tell you everything. But first, you need to understand how it all began. Because when you hear the ending, you'll think I've lost my mind. And maybe I really have. It was the beginning of August when the mission director, Dr. Evelyn Marks, called me on a video conference using a level of encryption I had never seen before. She appeared on the screen, a serious face, completely dark background, as if she were in an underground bunker. "Greaves," she said, "we're activating Protocol Umbra. Artemis Recon 5 is going off the public schedule." "Protocol Umbra?" I asked, confused. "That wasn't in the main documentation." She hesitated for half a second, then said only, "Because it wasn't supposed to be." 2 days later, I was in Houston, in a windowless room. No signal, no cell phone. Just me, 3 technicians, and a series of screens transmitting encrypted data from a probe that had already been in lunar orbit for 4 days. Artemis Recon 5. Officially, the mission was simple. Study the composition of lunar regolith in regions of permanent shadow. But the probe's real destination was an unnamed crater on the far side of the moon, a site that, until then, had only been flown over by Chinese and Russian satellites, and none of them had ever mentioned it publicly. During the first 2 days, the data were normal. Extreme temperature, absence of electromagnetic activity, nothing unusual. But then, something changed. On the 3rd day, the probe detected a sudden alteration in the local magnetic field. A pulse, almost imperceptible but definitely artificial, as if something was trying to communicate. "System noise?" I asked. "No," replied Kim, our spectroscopy specialist. "It's consistent, and it's coming from beneath the surface." We instructed the probe to adjust its orbit and focus on subsurface scanning. That's when we saw it. It was a buried structure, perfectly symmetrical, about 140 meters in diameter, hexagonal, with geometric patterns that made no sense. And at the center, something that emitted a weak but constant radiation. Immediately, Director Evelyn appeared in our room. Not by video, but in person. I had never seen anyone with that look, as if she already knew what we would find there. She handed us a new set of instructions. The probe was going to land. Yes, you heard that right. Artemis Recon 5, officially an orbital mission, was going to perform an unauthorized landing on the dark side of the moon. "But that's not even in the hardware," I protested. "It wasn't built to land." "Yes, it was," said Evelyn. "You just didn't know that." There was silence in the room. The next morning, the probe began its descent. And at 06 hours and 47 minutes Coordinated Universal Time, it touched the lunar surface less than 300 meters from the buried structure. And then, it began to move. Not the probe, the structure, as if it sensed its presence. "Is that some kind of intelligence?" Kim murmured. The magnetic field increased. A signal began to transmit. Simple, repetitive. But there was a pattern. I recognized it immediately. Fibonacci sequences, prime number codes, fractals. Yes, I had already begun to call it that, was trying to talk to us. But not with words, with logic, with mathematics, the universal language. And we responded. We used the probe itself as a transmitter. We sent similar patterns, signals based on universal constants. The answer came in seconds. This time, it was visual. The probe's camera captured something emerging from the ground, a mirrored surface, but it didn't reflect light like a common mirror. It absorbed, distorted. It was like looking at reality itself. Twisting. "Is that a portal?" one of the technicians asked. "No," said Evelyn. It's an eye. She knew. Somehow she already knew. The structure was a consciousness, not biological, not like ours. It was something that had existed there for thousands, millions of years. It had been dormant, or waiting for us. And now, it was awake. The following images were erased from the servers. Literally. They weren't just deleted. They were dematerialized. I know how that sounds. But one of our hard drives vanished. It didn't fail. It didn't burn out. It evaporated, as if it had never existed. But I remember. I saw what was in those files, the consciousness. It spoke to me, not with words, with images, memories. I saw Earth, I saw the past. I saw creatures that never existed in any fossil. I saw cities made of light-orbiting dead stars. I saw the birth of the moon itself. It is not just a natural satellite. It never was. You forgot us, said the voice in my mind. But we never forgot you. And then, silence. The transmission stopped. The structure closed. The radiation ceased. And the probe went inert. Evelyn simply looked at the screen, took a deep breath, and said, "She wants us to come back." I didn't understand. What do you mean she wants us to come back? The next mission hut will be manned. I was in shock. But why? What does she want? She looked at me as if she had been holding the answer for decades. She wants to give us a gift. That was the first part of the story. And if you think you've heard enough, you haven't even seen the beginning. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. A gift? From an entity that lives, or exists, on the far side of the moon? The structure that absorbs light, that communicates through fractals and distorts magnetic fields, wanted to give us a gift? Nothing made sense. But the look in Dr. Evelyn's eyes left no room for doubt. She knew more than she was telling. Much more. You knew this the whole time, didn't you? I asked. She hesitated. We've known something was there. Since 1972, I almost laughed. 72? The last Apollo mission? She nodded. They saw something. A reflection. A strange pattern in the terrain. And then, communications were cut for 2 minutes. You're saying they made contact? Not directly, but enough to know we were being watched. The mission was aborted early. The rest of the crew never knew the truth. I tried to comprehend the weight of it. Decades of concealment. And now they were sending us back, voluntarily, or better yet, as messengers. The structure did not move again after that day, but it left behind a weak, constant pulse, a frequency of 1,420 megahertz, the same used by radio telescopes to capture signals from deep space. Coincidence? Number it was intentional. It was like an invitation or a password. That night, Evelyn handed me an encrypted flash drive. Study this at home, but tell no one, not even your wife. I looked at her, alarmed. You're putting me at the center of this? It's not a choice, Jonathan. She chose you. I went home unable to think about anything else. I spent hours staring at the monitor, watching the images of the structure, the distortions, the shapes that defied geometry. And then, one file on the flash drive caught my eye. Ouroboros.dat. It was a sequence of images. Fragments of a dream, I would say. Planets spinning backward. Rain falling upward. A city folding in on itself like collapsing origami. And at the center of it all, a symbol. 2 overlapping circles, like eyes, or like an eclipse. That night I dreamed of her, of the consciousness. She spoke in tongues I didn't know, but I understood them. She showed me memories that weren't mine. The construction of the moon. Yes, you heard that right. The moon is not what they say it is. And in my dream, it floated like a hollow capsule, filled with chambers, circuits, like a station abandoned by ancient gods. I woke up with a nosebleed. I ran to the bathroom mirror. Behind my ear, there was a mark, like a symbol burned into the skin. 2 circles, just like in the file. I tried to wash it off. It wouldn't go away. Tried covering it with makeup. It didn't work. It was as if it were part of me, like an ancestral scar resurfacing. I returned to the control base the next day. But something was different. The doors that previously required multiple authorizations now opened automatically for me. The looks from colleagues had changed, as if they knew that I had been touched. Kim avoided me. When we crossed paths in the hallway, she lowered her eyes, but when we finally spoke, at the end of the day, she said something that stuck with me. She spoke to you, didn't she? I hesitated. How do you know that? Because she spoke to me too. Kim wasn't involved in the visual analysis operation. She wasn't supposed to have access to the probe's encrypted channel. And yet, she had the same dreams, the same visions, the same mark. How many of us? I asked. 6. 6 people from the team reported the same symptoms: dreams, bleeding, the mark. That entity, whatever it was choosing. She didn't just want us to return to the moon. She wanted us. We, the marked. Then came the official NASA announcement. Artemis 3, manned mission to the far side of the moon. Launch in 6 months. The media went wild. Politicians made speeches about the rebirth of space exploration. But all of that was a smokescreen. The real mission was to retrieve the gift. But no one knew what it was. The only clue came one night in September, when the structure sent a new signal, different from the others. A continuous pulse that converted to audio after modulation. It was a voice, software, almost human, and it said just one sentence: "Bring us the ones born of light, and the cycle shall be complete." I didn't know what it meant, but Evelyn did. She always did. And that's when things began to spiral out of control, because someone inside the government itself didn't want us to complete the cycle, didn't want us to accept the gift, and would do anything to prevent the return to the moon. I was being watched, and they were getting closer. The first signs were subtle. My access card began to fail in certain areas of the base. Files I knew I had read, even signed, vanished from the servers. Kim sent me encrypted messages in the middle of the night, always with cryptic phrases. The eyes are closing. They don't want her to speak. The moon is not ours. I started noticing cars parked for hours near my apartment complex. Same model, same plate, for 2 consecutive days. On the 3rd day, the plate changed, but it was clearly the same car. Agents? Contractors? I don't know. I just know Evelyn disappeared. 1 week before the launch of Artemis 3, she stopped attending meetings. They said she was on medical leave, but no one knew from which hospital. No one had spoken to her. And then I received a box at home. No return address. Inside, just a voice recorder and a handwritten note. "She's still alive. Listen, but burn it afterward." I closed all the windows, turned on the device. It was Evelyn. Her voice was trembling, but still carried that firmness. "Greaves, if you're hearing this, it's because they're coming. The gift, it's not a weapon, it's not technology, it's knowledge. She wants to show us what we truly are." Pause. They're afraid of that, because if we know, control ends. Another pause. Distant sounds, footsteps. She continued. "You were marked for a reason. Don't ignore the dreams. Don't ignore the connection. When Artemis 3 lands, go to the center. She will recognize you." And then silence. The recorder stopped on its own. I tried to rewind. It jammed. I burned the note, as instructed. But the recorder? I couldn't. The next night I had another dream. But this time, I wasn't alone. There were others like me. All with the mark. All walking on the surface of the moon. No suits, no limits. And in the sky, Earth was split in half. Not destroyed. Opened. As if it had been peeled, revealing something inside. Something made of light. And around us, they were there. Beings made of pure geometry. Floating. Indescribable. But familiar. As if they were the origin of everything. When I woke, I was drenched in sweat. But with something new. A word in my mind. Clear. Repeated like a mantra. Palingenesis. Rebirth. They were not trying to destroy us. They were trying to awaken us. But someone here, someone in our world, preferred to keep everything silent. Artemis 3 was launched with 4 crew members. 3 known names. The 4th was never revealed to the public. Me. Officially, I was only the engineer responsible for the mission's encrypted link, working from the ground. But there was a hidden module, a smaller capsule, attached to the rocket's final stage. They called it the Ghost Passenger. Only Kim and I knew about it, and even she didn't know exactly where I was going. The plan was simple. I would enter the capsule during the mission's 2nd stage, already in lunar orbit. Controlled remotely, it would place me at the exact point where the structure had been detected. The main crew would land kilometers to the south, with another mission, to film, to broadcast, to distract. And I would cross what Evelyn called the threshold. But something went wrong. During orbital insertion, an alert flashed on the display. Mass variation detected. The capsule was heavier than it should be. I was not alone. The voice came over the intercom. Male. Calm. Do not be afraid. I was chosen too. I looked behind me, and there he was. Someone with the same mark. 2 circles on the back of the neck. But I had never seen him before. Who are you? I asked. He smiled. I'm the first. Even before Evelyn. I was with her in 1992, when the first probe attempted contact. I was erased from the records, but she kept me alive. Now, the time has come. I had no words. He extended his hand. Let's go together, Jonathan. She wants all the marked ones, and the gift requires more than one vessel. The capsule descended. The moon below us was a silver abyss. And there, at the center of the crater, she was waiting for us. The structure, more alive than ever, pulsing. And then, she opened. The opening was nothing like I imagined. There was no explosion, no mechanical movement. The structure simply yielded, as if reality itself was bending to let us in. A deep blue and black glow emanated from within, like a fusion of night sky and deep ocean. I hesitated for a second. But he, the nameless man, the first, just smiled and stepped forward. She already knows you, he said. You've been here before. That sentence hit me like a punch. Me? Been there? It wasn't possible. I had never left Earth. But what if my memory wasn't complete? What if part of me had already been awakened before? We entered, and it was like falling into a star. Gravity vanished. The walls of the structure dematerialized. There was no ceiling, no floor, only patterns of light and geometry swirling around us. I saw constellations that don't exist in our sky, shapes that defied physics, and voices, hundreds, perhaps thousands, all speaking in unison, without making a sound. But I understood. They were thoughts, ideas, fragments of knowledge. They spoke of cycles, of repetitions, of eras before our own, and how, in each cycle, a species was chosen for reconnection. And then I saw Earth, not as it is, but as it was, and as it could be. The consciousness, she wasn't just inside the structure, she was the structure. She was the very space around us. And she was showing us the gift. But it wasn't an object. It was a choice. The choice to integrate. She communicated with me directly. You were seeded, not to serve, but to understand. Your limitations are self-imposed. Your time is not linear. I felt something activate within my mind, like a memory that had always been there, but only now was allowed to surface. I saw the formation of the moon not as a random collision, but as an intentional construction, a capsule, a beacon. She was a device for observation, for transmission, and now for transformation. You are ready for the next stage. I looked at the man beside me. He, too, was in ecstasy. His face radiated understanding, and tears, real tears, ran down his cheeks. She wants us to take this back, he whispered. But what is it? I asked. He smiled. The map. Images began to form in the space around us. 3-dimensional maps, star systems, codes that jumped between color frequencies, a path, not just back to Earth, but beyond it, to other structures, other beacons, other gifts. But before we could absorb more, the pulse came, like a shockwave. The structure trembled, the voices ceased, and the light changed, from blue to red. They're trying to block her, said the man, tense. Who? The same group that erased Evelyn. They have technology, limited but enough to interfere. They're activating orbital jammers. They want to cut the link between her and Earth. The capsule that had brought us there blinked on my display. Automatic retrieval in 90 seconds, said the mission's artificial intelligence. The structure began to close. Greaves, the map! He shouted. I looked at my hand, the symbol, the mark. It was expanding, pulsing, and then I realized The map wasn't something physical. It was information, being stored inside us, in our minds, in our biology. She was turning us into carriers, into vessels, into messengers. The capsule pulled us back at the exact moment the structure closed completely. The descent was violent. Everything spun. Alarms blared. Lights flashed. I heard metal twisting, a flare of light, and then silence. The next thing I saw was the surface of the moon, distorted by a cracked hatch. Beside me, the man was unconscious. Blood trickled from his ear, but the smile was still on his face. He had succeeded, and so had I. The gift was with us. But the question pounding in my mind was another. If they didn't want us to return, how far would they go to prevent Earth from receiving the gift? And more importantly, why exactly were they so afraid of what was about to happen? The return capsule made an emergency landing dozens of kilometers from the planned extraction point. The module was damaged, the sensors failing, and communication with the ground team had been completely severed. I tried to activate the emergency transmitter, but the signal wouldn't go through. It was as if we were inside a bubble. "Is he alive?" I asked, turning to the unconscious man beside me. Nothing. I checked his vital signs. Weak, but stable. Dried blood around his left ear. Something had happened during re-entry, perhaps a neural overload, perhaps a reaction to the map being embedded in his mind. Or maybe she was protecting the information from potential external access. I tried to open the hatch manually. The pressure was intense. I used brute force, tools, and finally succeeded. The moon's light flooded the capsule. Dim, gray, silent. And there, on the horizon, the silhouette of the crater that housed the structure was still visible even from a distance. She had closed, but something told me she was still watching. I hoisted the man onto my shoulders and began walking. The suit was heavy. The moon's gravity helped, but every step felt harder. Along the way, I began to feel interference. In my thoughts, it was as if I were hearing whispers that weren't mine. Intrusive thoughts, but not hostile. They didn't come from me. They came from outside, or from within. Hard to say. They repeated something. Descent is ascension. The path is cyclical. The spiral does not end. My pulse quickened. Halfway there, I stopped to rest and looked up. Earth, but it wasn't as I remembered it. There was a faint distortion, like a spectral haze enveloping the planet. A kind of halo, pulsating, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. Then I realized the gift was already manifesting, even before our return. She had activated something. A code? A field? I don't know. All I know is something had been initiated, and it could no longer be stopped. I finally reached the extraction point. The rescue team was in a panic. They surrounded me, weapons drawn, dark suits. They weren't from NASA. I didn't recognize a single face. They were hostile from the start. "Did you make contact?" one of them asked. "With whom?" I answered, out of breath. They shoved me to the lunar ground. The other man, still unconscious, was taken immediately to a separate capsule. I was restrained. My biometric data scanned. One of them spoke on a private channel, but my mind, now clearer than ever, picked it up anyway. Confirmed. Both have been exposed. Proceed with level 8 quarantine. Cognitive isolation. Cleanup order authorized if resistance is detected. Cleanup. They were going to erase our minds, or worse. The rescue capsule brought us back without ceremony. No medical protocol, no mission psychologist. Just faceless men, cold commands, and absolute silence. I was kept in a cell for days. No window, no sense of time. Only an automated voice that said every 6 hours, "Please wait. The transition is being processed." Transition? I began to have visions, not like before. This time, I saw Earth, but not as a planet, as a system. Patterns revealed themselves behind the clouds, geometries hidden in the continents, ancient signals buried in the DNA of our civilization. She was awakening something, not in me, but in the entire world. And then, the cell door opened, and there she was, standing there, Kim. But something was wrong. Her eyes, they glowed, faintly, blue, like the light from the structure. She smiled. "You're ready, Jonathan. The gift has arrived." I was paralyzed. That was Kim. I recognized her voice, her mannerisms, even the small scar above her left eyebrow. But her eyes, those eyes were not hers. Or at least not hers alone anymore. "Kim," I whispered. She approached slowly, still smiling. She extended her hand like someone inviting an old friend to rise from bed. "You're confused. That's natural. Integration is subtle at first. But I promise, clarity comes later." I instinctively backed away, pressing against the cell wall. "What did you do? What did they do to you?" "I accepted," she said. "The same thing you were chosen to do." "I didn't accept anything," she smiled, like someone hearing a child deny they're sleepy. "You already accepted, Jonathan. When you stepped into that crater, when you looked into the eye of the structure, when you let her in, my thoughts were in a whirl. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that all this was part of a greater plan, something necessary, inevitable. But the other part, the human part, the part that still felt fear, the part that still wanted to understand before surrendering, that part screamed for help. "And the other man?" I asked. "The first one. What happened to him?" Kim's smile faltered. For a fraction of a second. "He couldn't bear it. The map was too heavy, but he delivered it. He fulfilled his purpose." I closed my eyes. The image of his face, smiling in the capsule as the structure enveloped us, was still vivid in my mind. "So now it's my turn, is that it? Not just yours. Thousands are already awakening. But you are special." She touched the wall, and it dissolved. Behind it, a corridor lit by that soft blue glow. "Come, they want to see you." "They... who?" She didn't answer. She just walked. And I, like a prisoner obedient to a dream that could no longer be avoided, followed. The corridor made no sense. There were no right angles. The floor moved under my feet like a living magnetic field. And in the distance, I heard songs, but not with words. It was like a choir of mouthless voices, harmonies that vibrated directly in my mind. Kim stopped before a translucent door. "You'll understand now." She pressed her palm against the glass, and it vanished. On the other side, a room, circular, tall, with walls covered in luminous spirals that seemed alive. And in the center, 3 figures, not human, but beautiful, in a way I still didn't understand. They seemed made of condensed light, geometric structures floating within a pulsing aura. Their faces, if I can call them that, were composed of constantly shifting patterns. And when they looked at me, I felt everything. They didn't need to speak. They simply showed me. They showed me who I was, who we all were, how our minds had been shaped to forget, how the world was manipulated to prevent awakening, and how the gift was not just knowledge, it was liberation, the end of the cycle of ignorance, the beginning of reconnection with what we were before we were human. "You are a bridge," said all the thoughts flowing into me, between the species that forgot and what we were before time. I wept, but not from fear. I wept because, for the first time, I understood everything, every dream, every mark, every loss. It all led here. And then they made the invitation. The world is ready, but it needs a catalyst, a signal, something that makes everyone look up. You, Jonathan, will carry that signal. And there, in that impossible room, I accepted, even without knowing exactly what that meant, even without knowing what awaited me upon returning to Earth. I accepted, and in that instant, something within me awakened. It was like crossing an invisible barrier. The second I accepted, I felt as if my body ceased to be mere matter. My skin tingled, my eyes saw in spectra I had never known, and my thoughts expanded, as if I had gained more space within myself. The entities, or consciousnesses, whatever they were, enveloped me in light. It wasn't heat, nor cold. It was purpose, direction, and within that light, I saw the map. This time, with perfect clarity. It wasn't just an interstellar path, it was a circuit, a code, symbolic sequences that altered the way we perceived reality. They rewrote. They were activators, not of machines, but of minds, human minds. And I was the first to carry it with full awareness. They called it the Aurora Key. You will return with it, they said through thought. But it cannot be forced. The gift must be given. I felt my body realign. The light receded slowly, like the tide. And when I realized it, I was back in the cell. But the cell was open. Kim was no longer there. And I was no longer the same. The containment facility's structure seemed different, as if it recognized that I had crossed a threshold. Doors opened before I touched them. Systems shut down as I passed. And then, a voice. Greaves. It was Evelyn. Yes, Evelyn, alive, sitting on a bench in an observation chamber, wearing the same black coat as always. But her eyes now shone like Kim's. You did it, she said, smiling. They said you were dead. They lied, she replied calmly. But you already knew that, didn't you? I nodded slowly. She stood up. You're going back to Earth, but they still want to stop it. Yes, she said, and they'll try. But now, you're no longer alone. And then, as if connected by the same impulse, I understood. Others like me were awakening. Not just Kim, not just Evelyn, but dozens, hundreds, perhaps thousands. Marks appearing in different places around the world. People with dreams, with visions, with symptoms doctors called delusion. But it wasn't delusion. It was reconnection. How are we going to do it? I asked. She looked to the ceiling, as if looking to space. The world is watching. Artemis 3 was only the beginning. But now, we will broadcast the true message. Broadcast how? You'll know when you get there. The key knows the moment. It awakens on its own. And then, without fanfare, I was led to a transport module. The men in black were no longer there. Or if they were, they didn't reveal themselves. The return flight to Earth was silent. Not because there was no sound, but because my mind now absorbed everything. I could hear the thoughts of the planet, even from thousands of kilometers away. Fear, doubt, curiosity, and a thread of hope. I knew that the moment my feet touched the ground again, everything would change, for everyone, and I could no longer go back. The gift was with me, and Earth was about to receive it. The return was discreet. No cameras, no flags, no press conferences. I was brought back to Earth as a prisoner with secret clearance. But I knew, deep down, that this landing would change everything. As soon as the capsule touched down, I felt it. The world was different. Not in physical things, but in frequencies. It was as if Earth was vibrating in a new way, as if reality itself was in standby mode. I was received by 3 figures. None of them spoke. They simply observed me. They had that same look, the look of the marked. They knew, they felt. We crossed the hangar in silence. A helicopter waited outside, rotors already spinning. In less than 30 minutes, we were flying over the New Mexico desert. Destination: Sandstone Array, a transmission complex that, until a few months ago, was just another among NASA's many radio research centers. But now, it was something more. Evelyn waited for me at the entrance. "Are you ready?" she asked, without preamble. I nodded. We entered a circular room, surrounded by antennas, holographic panels, and a single artifact suspended at the center, a quartz crystal encased in a pulsing energy field. The key. It had materialized after my full exposure to the structure. It was the gift, or part of it, converted into form. What exactly is going to happen when I activate this? I asked. Evelyn stepped closer. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of reverence and fear. Earth will hear. Hear what? The call. The answer didn't comfort me. But it didn't frighten me either. It simply made sense. I touched the crystal. Instantly, a wave coursed through my body, like liquid electricity, passing through every cell, every synapse, every memory. Images exploded in my mind. Ancient cities made of sound. Planets where time moved in spirals. Beings that existed only as equations. And then Earth, seen from the outside, fragile. Ready, the transmission began. The antennas of the Sandstone Array aligned automatically. Orbiting satellites responded to the silent command. Radio towers, undersea cables, meteorological monitoring stations. Everything began vibrating on the same frequency. And then The sound. It was not a conventional message. It was a sequence of impossible tones, able to be heard and felt, not only with ears, but with dreams, with genetic memory, with the soul, if you wish to call it that. People around the world began waking from dreams, eyes filled with tears. Ancient languages, extinct for millennia, began to be spoken spontaneously by children. Images of unknown constellations appeared in drawings made by catatonic patients. And above all, the same phrase echoed in the minds of the marked, across all continents. The cycle is opening. The reaction was immediate. Governments triggered containment protocols. Intelligence agencies classified the signal as an Omega-level threat, but it was already too late. The seed had been planted. Evelyn looked at me. Now comes the hardest part. What could be harder than this? I asked, feeling my mind nearly fracture under the pressure of so much new information. She took a deep breath. They're going to try to destroy the gift. Who? She pointed to the ceiling. The ones who always knew, the ones who always hid, the ones who fear that humans might learn what they truly are. And at that very moment, the alarm sounded. An attack was coming, not from outside, but from within. Someone, or something, was attempting to erase the gift from the collective human mind. And we had to stop it, because if the key was destroyed now, the entire cycle would be reset, and we would forget, again. The first explosion shook the complex like a dry thunderclap. Lights flickered. The field surrounding the key wavered. Evelyn ran to the containment panel and entered a code that seemed extracted from some alien language. Hexadecimal patterns interspersed with simple fractals. The attack is coming from inside the network, she said. They don't need to breach physically. They'll try to collapse the resonance through symbolic interference. I didn't understand immediately. But Kim, now at our side, explained it in a sentence I'll never forget. They're going to use the collective unconscious against us. It was genius and terrifying. If the key was a transmission to awaken humanity, then all they needed to do was seed fear, chaos, doubt, primitive emotions, mimetic programs that would cancel out the key's patterns before they could complete. Fake news, false cults, mass hysteria. They knew how to do it, and they were doing it. Images began to spread worldwide. Affected cities, possessed individuals, children speaking demonic tongues. All manipulated, all to discredit the gift. Kim shouted, "Levels are dropping. If the frequency falls below 0.618, the map fragments." Evelyn pulled me. "You need to go to the central chamber. Now only you can reactivate the core." "Why me?" She held my face firm. "Because you accept it completely. Because she is inside you." I ran through the trembling corridors of the complex. Outside, helicopters hovered, and sirens howled like panicked animals. But the sound guiding me was another, a deep hum, almost ancestral, coming from within me. The key was alive. I reached the central chamber, a metallic sphere suspended, surrounded by crystal panels. At its center, a liquid mirror, the core. I approached. It reacted to my touch. Images exploded in my mind once again. But this time, it was the future. Cities illuminated by thought. Lifespans stretched over centuries. Planets connected through organic networks of knowledge. And most astonishing of all, peace. Not imposed peace, but understood peace. "Jonathan," the voice echoed inside me. "You are the echo of the first call, the bearer of the final seed. Protect it." The sphere began to spin. The entire complex trembled. Outside, armed drones approached. Soldiers in tactical suits surrounded the perimeter. They were ready to erase everything, but the key, now merged with me, took control. "Enough," said a voice that was mine, and wasn't. And the sphere exploded in light. Not destructive, transformative. The pulse traveled the globe in seconds. Satellites failed, servers collapsed. But in their place, new networks emerged, organic, conscious. Earth was beginning to awaken, and we were about to see what lay beyond sleep. The pulse spread like an invisible aurora. There were no explosions, no chaos. What happened was deeper, more silent. A wave of clarity crossed every human being connected to the network. The signals, the planet's vibrations. Even those who had never heard of Artemis, of the moon, or of the structure, felt it, and I felt it too, but in a different way, because the key was now part of me, not just as a symbol, as function. I was the link, and with every second after activation, my mind expanded. I saw patterns in people's eyes, in the clouds, in the base's electric circuits. The structure's language was now in everything. Kim and Evelyn entered the chamber, now bathed in blue and golden light. Evelyn stopped beside me, looking at the suspended sphere. "You survived," she said. "This is only the beginning," I replied. But there was no time for contemplation. Outside, the world began to respond, in every possible way. In some cities, crowds entered peaceful trances, stopping everything to look at the sky. In others, paramilitary groups attempted to sabotage communication towers, claiming the alien voice was corrupting humanity. But it wasn't alien. It was ancient, far older than any civilization on Earth. And with each passing hour, more marked ones awakened. In hospitals, prisons, remote villages, schools, they opened their eyes, and they knew. They knew the gift had arrived, that the cycle had broken, that the silence was over. But with the awakening came the collapse of old control systems. Governments fell. Financial networks suffered brutal oscillations. Systems based on power and fear began to crumble, not from rebellion, but from obsolescence. People simply stopped believing, and those still clinging to the old paradigm were growing desperate. We intercepted private transmissions between leaders of the so-called core sovereign nations. They knew. They had always known, since the first signal from the structure in 1959, since the fall of probes in the Pacific, since the silent contact of 1972. And for decades, they hid it, manipulated, created entire systems to ensure humanity would not awaken. And now, everything was collapsing. "They're going to try to use Protocol Adam," said Evelyn, grim. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "A global emergency protocol to inject pure fear into the network, a reverse symbolic pulse capable of resetting the collective unconscious." Kim added, "They call it the anti-key, a coded signal to undo the awakening." But we were already prepared. The sphere, now fused to my neural field, responded instinctively. Like the natural defense of a living organism, we transmitted the countercode before the attack was even launched. And when they pressed the button, nothing happened. The world did not regress. On the contrary, something moved forward. The moon changed color, subtly. A faint golden hue began to radiate from its shadows. Kim looked at me in shock. She opened, and in that instant I felt it. What we had activated was not just for us. It was an invitation to all the others. The night sky would never be the same. That night, when the moon took on that golden tone, something aligned, not just in the orbits of celestial bodies, but within us. The pulse that had traversed the planet now seemed to echo outward, far beyond, like a beacon, answering others. Kim stood motionless for minutes, watching the readings appear on the command center's panels. I watched with her, and each new data point was confirmation. "They're responding," she said, her voice nearly choking with emotion. The coordinates appearing matched nothing known. No satellites, no stations. They were cold points in deep space, now active. The stars were blinking, literally, Evelyn confirmed. "They're not stars. They're beacons like ours. Structures hidden in distant systems, waiting for the cycle to complete before responding. Now that we've awakened, they recognize the resonance. But why now?" I asked. "Why not before?" she answered with a serious gaze. "Because no one had accepted all the way through. Every previous cycle failed before full reconnection. Humans either destroyed the key or destroyed themselves first. But now, for the first time, we passed the curve of fear. Fear, the most powerful barrier of all. And it had been overcome not through force, but through understanding. Messages from the beacons began to arrive, not as linear language, but as shared dreams. Dozens of marked individuals around the planet reported the same visions at the same moment. A black sea filled with golden towers. A planet made of crystallized thoughts. A consciousness embracing solar systems like a living web. It was the collective, the true origin of the lunar structure. A network of ancient intelligences spread across forgotten galaxies whose purpose was to awaken civilizations on the brink of self-destruction, offering not salvation, but choice. And we had chosen. Earth, for the first time, had answered clearly, with acceptance, with the decision to transcend the cycles of fear, control, and repetition. The moon was only the first station, one among thousands. And now? I asked. My mind expanded to limits I had never imagined. Now they come, said Evelyn. How? I questioned. As a reflection of what we are, Kim added. They have no form. They take on ours, or whatever we desire, because they do not teach with words. They will teach through presence. And then all sensors in the command center blinked simultaneously. A new signal, stronger, closer, directly from the moon. It was the structure, reopening, but this time it wasn't calling just to me. It was calling to all the awakened, all who had received the mark, the memory, the music. She was ready to show us the next step, and we would go. The news spread like a silent flame. The structure had reopened, and now it didn't ask for a single emissary. It demanded a delegation. The marked began to move, without formal summons, without traditional leadership. They simply knew where to go. It was as if a magnetic field were drawing them, all converging on the extraction points defined by the structure itself. Houston Base, Baikonur Complex, the Chinese space station in Xichang, all cooperating as if old rivalries had evaporated the instant awakening occurred. There were no borders. There was a single objective, to return, but this time, together. I was appointed as the guide of the mission, not by command order, but by consensus. The other marked ones merely looked at me and understood. I had been the first to cross, to witness, to accept, and now to lead. The transport module was different, developed silently based on data transmitted by the structure. A hybrid craft, half human, half resonant. We called it perennial light. It did not use combustion. It moved by intention, and it carried 50 of us, among them Kim, Evelyn, a 12-year-old boy from Indonesia who spoke to sleeping stars, an elderly woman from Detroit who had seen the same dreams since 1963, an indigenous elder from Canada who had painted symbols identical to those of the structure in caves decades before the Artemis mission. All marked, all ready. The launch was gentle, almost imperceptible. There was no violent acceleration, no sound, just a subtle shift of consciousness. And then, we were already orbiting the moon. The crater, once hidden, isolated, sealed, now pulsed like an open heart. And at its center, the structure was alive. It rotated in multiple dimensions. It sang. The perennial light landed with ceremonial softness. As we disembarked, no gravity seemed to affect us. We walked, without suits, without fear. Time seemed suspended. And then, she absorbed us. Not like before. Not as an individual experience, but as a chorus. 50 consciousnesses, merged, and on the other side, her. The central consciousness, the origin of the network, the birth of the key. She did not speak. She showed. She showed us why. Each awakened planet is a node. Each cycle overcome, a new voice in the cosmic choir. We had reached the point where the biological meets the symbolic, where memory becomes matter, where humanity ceases to be a species and becomes a function. We were now the bridge, not just with them, but with everything. And then the final question, the only one that truly mattered. Do you wish to continue? And there, floating in the mind of the galaxy itself, we answered. In the instant we said yes, everything changed. Not gradually, but like a key turning, as if the universe had held its breath for ages, and finally exhaled. The structure opened fully, and for the first time, we saw the core. It was not made of metal, nor stone, nor any known material. It was made of time, waves of history, of possibilities, of paths never taken. And there, at the center, the origin of the key. It was a fragment of primordial consciousness, the first spark. Not an entity with a will of its own, but a catalyst. A mirror. It reflected what we were in potential, and offered us the choice to become. And that's when we understood what the gift truly was. It was not knowledge, nor technology, nor power. It was freedom. True freedom. Freedom from ignorance, of the imposed cycles, of the inherited fears, of the idea of separation between one and another, between us and the cosmos, between time and being. There, each one of us lived 1,000 lives simultaneously. We saw humanity rise and fall countless times. We saw the choices we didn't make. We saw love and hatred in their purest forms. And then we made the final choice, to bring the gift back, not as an item, but as a state. The return was unlike anything else. The perennial light didn't descend. It unfolded, as if terrestrial reality were just a layer that could now be traversed freely. When we stepped again onto Earth's soil, the world knew, not through news, but because it felt it. The vibration changed. The sounds of nature adopted new tones. Animals behaved strangely, as if recognizing something ancient. People, thousands, began to awaken spontaneously, without ever having heard of the mission. And they all said the same thing. She is here. Kim became a kind of emissary, traveling from city to city, simply listening, connecting. Evelyn vanished from public view. They say she went to the South Pole, where another structure had begun to emerge from the ice. As for me, I didn't return to my old life. I couldn't. My mind was too open. I became a whisper, present where I needed to be, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in thoughts, sometimes merely as a quiet certainty that everything had changed. The gift was delivered, and the cycle at last had been broken. Today I walk among people and notice something different in their eyes. It's not exactly understanding. It's intuition, as if a deep part of every human being were beginning to remember something they never lived. But that had always been there. The structure remains silent now, but it is not dormant. It is listening, observing, vibrating in a rhythm only those who've passed through the reconnection can feel. And it is not alone. Around the world, similar structures have begun to emerge. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, sensors captured an impossible sound, the same Fibonacci sequence emitted by the lunar crater. In the Sahara, a formation of submerged crystals began to pulse with light at intervals, coinciding with solar eclipses. In Antarctica, radar imagery revealed a pattern, identical to the one we saw in the Keys sphere. They were here all along, waiting. And now that we've listened, they are responding. Human civilization still exists. There are still governments. There is still an economy. But the structure of collective consciousness has been altered. Children dream of geometric forms before they learn to speak. Some adults wake with phrases in dead languages they never studied. And on the quietest nights, it is possible to hear the music, not on radios, but in the air itself, as if the entire planet had become part of a cosmic choir. The question everyone asks me, when they recognize me, is always the same. And now? What comes next? I always smile, because the truth is I don't know, and no one should. That is the beauty of the gift. It is not a manual, it is not a weapon, it is not an answer, it is a door, and only you can decide whether to cross it. As for me, I keep walking, sometimes in silence, sometimes whispering stories like this one in cafes, on trains, in parks, waiting for someone to recognize the melody hidden in the words. Perhaps you're listening now, and if you are, perhaps you are one of the marked as well. Look up at the sky tonight. If the moon blinks, you'll know. She is still there, watching, waiting, because the cycle, though broken, never ends. It merely begins again.